Hey everyone. So sorry, we're having some technical difficulties, but just thought I would chat with you while we're trying to get this figured out. Hopefully we can get Tom on pretty soon. How's everyone doing tonight? Oh, good. Looks like we have Tom. So hold on. Let me just bring him on. I think he's still getting situated. We'll give him a second. Oh, good, Paul. So glad to hear you're doing well. Okay. Thanks, Cloudy with a Chance of UFOs. I'm great. I'm happy to be here and talking with you guys tonight. All right. Looks like we have Tom. So let me pull him up for us and then we'll get started. I can't wait.
Can you hear
me?
Hey,
Tom. I can hear you just fine.
Okay,
yep. Good. Okay. I am going to get us started.
Very good.
Okay. All right. Here we go, everybody. From the spooky land near Salem, Mass. to you listening around the world, this, my ghouls and guys, is Spaced Out Saturday. I'm your host and Spaced Out Radio's resident witch, Lynn Wallington, coming to you live from my broomstick. So grab a seat, keep your arms and legs on the brooms at all times. In case of emergency, as you know, there are no oxygen masks or flotation devices, so just hang on tight as we fly into tonight's adventure. We welcome you to tonight's show on YouTube, Twitter, and Twitch. If you want to take a listen to the archives, they are free at youtube.com/spacedoutradio. Just do us the favor and hit that subscribe button. You can also follow us on Twitter at spacedoutradio and my personal handle at witchylinny, witchy with a Y, Linny with an IE. And don't forget to follow us on Instagram at spacedoutradioshow and at witchylinny. Our website is spacedoutradio.com, where we have a plethora of features for you, including Rocking Out to Bumblefoot, Read Up on the SOR Newswire, and so much more. And if you're in the mood for some paranormal stories combined with utter ridiculousness, you can also find me and my friend Caitlin on YouTube at Paranormal Spirits. I've put the link in the description down below. And if you enjoy Emily's drinking game on that YouTube channel and want to play here tonight, please feel free to do so. For those of you who aren't familiar, the game is simple. Anytime I screw up a word or phrase, you get to take a drink. So that's all the time. It's Saturday night, and here on Spaced Out Saturday, that means it is cocktail time. And for tonight's Witch's Brew, I'm enjoying a lovely rosé sangria. So grab yourself a drink, sit back, and we're going to have a fun night together. So tonight we're going to be talking with Tom Whitmore. Longtime MUFON board member Tom Whitmore had been a San Antonio, Texas resident since 1984. Originally from Tulsa, Tom graduated with a degree in business administration from Portland State University and had a career in the financial industry since the 1970s. He was most recently employed as a financial analyst with a local firm in San Antonio, where he retired in 2019. He's an accomplished guitarist and has a grown daughter. Tom was invited to join the MUFON board in 1995. He serves as treasurer and focuses on long-term and strategic issues for the organization. Tom has been fascinated by military and intelligence agencies' interactions with the UFO public. He has undertaken a research study of the history of the MJ-12 controversy and intends to eventually publish his findings. He participates in discussions on the MJ-12 topic by giving presentations to local UFO groups, appearing on internet podcasts and radio shows, and by communicating in social media. Tom recently relocated to San Antonio, Texas, after living for 19 months in the Washington, D.C. area. He's authored 2 research papers on tomwhitmoreblog.wordpress.com, and Tom is currently researching the Air Force Office of Special Investigations. So let me bring him on. Hi, Tom. Welcome to the show.
Hi, Lynn. Thank you for having me. I'm really looking forward to this.
Oh, me too. I know everybody else is as well. Oh, fantastic. I'm glad we got you on.
Thank you. I had to switch browsers. I just got a new Mac. And the default browser is Safari, and your link it won't support that. So I had to go over. So I finally got it figured out.
Yeah, I know. StreamYard is, I don't know why it's difficult. Likes Chrome. It's just partial to it, I guess. I don't know. But I'm very excited to have you on and talk about the wonderful world of MJ12. Very exciting. So let's just get right into it. So I am so curious. Okay, so you were a financial analyst. What brought you into the world of UFOs?
I've been interested in UFOs since I was about 12 years old, and I was at a friend's house and I saw a Donald Kehoe book on the bookshelf, Flying Saucers, Top Secret, and that piqued my interest. And I read a couple of books by Donald Kehoe, and that was back in the 60s. And it was a different world back then. We actually had newspapers. People didn't find everything on the internet. And the newspapers and even some of the TV shows talked about UFOs quite a bit. There had been a lot of activity in the United States and around the world, and it was on people's minds. So I became interested in it at that time, but I didn't get active until the very late 80s and the early 90s. And I saw UFO magazine on a storefront window, and I read that, and this got into all the article that I read got into all this conspiracy stuff about underground bases and the government knowing about aliens and all of this. And I don't know, maybe I was a little bit naive in taking an interest from that. But after the MJ12 documents had come out, and I had started getting into the UFO literature, when I saw the MJ12 documents, that's what really piqued my interest the most. And the reason for that is Lynn, I've always read a lot of history. I've been reading history since I was a young person, read stacks of books year after year. And eventually I got into the subject of the history of the Soviet Union and espionage. And I started reading up on CIA, and I got interested in espionage and intelligence work in a general sense. And when I saw the MJ12 documents, the original set, which was the Eisenhower briefing document and the Truman Forrestal memo, I immediately thought that it might have something to do with espionage or counter-espionage or propaganda or psychological warfare or something like that.
Yeah.
So I got involved in the UFO field. I joined MUFON because MUFON at the time was being run out of Seguin, Texas. I was living in San Antonio, Texas, and Walt Andrus, who was running MUFON, would come to the local meetings in San Antonio. So he got to know me. I got to know him. Eventually, I was invited onto the board around 1995 at the Austin Symposium. And I've been on the board ever since. So I was, like you said, I was employed in the financial industry. I ended up being a financial analyst for a local company here. And I was married and had a daughter and raised a child. My wife, unfortunately, passed away. My daughter's grown. And so I was able to retire. And now I can devote myself to what really fascinates me the most, which is the history of the MJ12 affair. And on my blog, you'll see perspectives on the MJ12 affair. So the reason I'm putting it that way is that the original reference to MJ12 came out in a document known as the Aquarius Telex that was given to Paul Benowitz way back in the 1980s. And then in the mid-'80s, certain UFO researchers received the original set of MJ12 documents, and those became public in 1987. And one of the reasons why this is also interesting to me is because it didn't stop there. In the late 80s, we had Bob Lazar come out and make his claims.
Yeah.
Then in the 90s, we had another document come out called the SOM 1-01 manual. And also during the 90s, we had the alien autopsy film come out. Yeah. Then in the 2000s, we had the Serpo story. come into play. And I just skipped over the 90s when there was really a large volume of documents that came into the possession of Timothy Cooper, a UFO researcher. And then in the 2000s, we got the Serpo story. Then as late as 2017, we've had what I call the ultra top secret document that came up on the internet. So my theory, I guess, a theory that I'm working out of, Lynn, is that the MJ12 affair has gone on almost up to the present day. And this has been over a 40-year period. So why? I can't necessarily answer that. But this has been going on over a 40-year period. And so that, I think that's a very interesting situation.
I agree. Can you maybe give a brief synopsis? I know a lot of people have probably heard of the Majestic 12 documents, but they're not necessarily aware of what they were. Can you just give a brief synopsis of that? I know it's a lot of documents, but.
Well, the original MJ12 documents were called the Eisenhower briefing document, the Truman Forrestal memo, and the Cutler-Twining memo. And these were they were actually copies of documents that were photographed on 35 millimeter film, and a person by the name of Jamie Chandray received them at his doorstep or in the mail. It was the package was it was postmarked Albuquerque, New Mexico, and Jamie Chandray brought them to Bill Moore, who at the time was a prominent UFO researcher, and they began analyzing the documents. And then Stanton Friedman got involved, and Stanton Friedman did a great deal of research on the people involved in the content of the document. Well, what happened was in the Eisenhower briefing document, it stated that there had been the UFO crash at Roswell. It had been recovered. They recovered bodies. It also mentioned another crash at El Indio Guerrero, Mexico. But the gist of it was that, a saucer had been recovered, bodies had been recovered. And so the government, freaking out, naturally, if you imagine getting into a situation like that, a committee of 12 top people was formed, approved by President Truman, who were assigned to study it. And these people included, certain top generals like Hoyt Vandenberg, who became the chief of staff of the Air Force, and Nathan Twining, General Nathan Twining, who also became chief of staff later. Vannevar Bush, who had run the Office of Research and Development during World War II, and he was even over General Groves, who was over the atomic bomb. So he was very, very high up. And they had a list of scientists, a couple of government people. Gordon Gray was one of them, and some other scientists. And this committee of 12 people, and it was referred to as Majestic 12, Operation Majestic 12, and MJ12 for short. And the Eisenhower briefing document had a security stamp on it, MAJIC, MAJIC, which is also famous in this whole subject. So, yeah.
Now, the Eisenhower briefing document, what is that exactly? Because I think I know what it is, but I'm not 100% sure.
Well, it's purportedly a briefing for President-elect Eisenhower, and it occurred. I believe the document was dated in November of 1952, and Dwight Eisenhower is getting ready to take office in January of 1953. So it's allegedly a briefing to President Eisenhower of the UFOs, the secret UFO situation. That's why it's called the Eisenhower briefing document.
Okay, yeah, that's what I was thinking. Go ahead.
And then, in addition to that, there's another paper in which President Truman allegedly authorizes the formation of the Majestic 12 committee, and that it would report directly to him, only to him, the President of the United States. And then also during the general time period that these documents were being received, Bill Moore and Jamie Chandray had gone to the National Archives, and they had recovered a document that has become known as the Cutler-Twining memo. Mm-hmm. And that document is purportedly an instruction by Robert Cutler, who is a White House staffer, a very high level person, and instructing General Twining that the MJ-12 SSP meeting would be held during the regular meeting instead of after. It didn't say what MJ-12 was about, and mm-hmm. it didn't really have any other information than that, but it did say MJ-12/SSP, which stood for Special Studies Project.
Right. So it seems like there are quite a few documents, whether they are real or not is obviously in question, that support these MJ-12 documents. What is your thought on that? Are these documents, were they faked, or are the MJ-12 documents, in your opinion? Obviously, I know none of us knows for sure. It's quite the controversy. I know there are a lot of people that are very adamant that they believe that they're real, and a lot of people are very adamant that they think that they are not. What is your feeling on that?
Well, the Eisenhower briefing document was really very closely scrutinized, Lynn, by mm-hmm. a number of people, and a lot of things have been found wrong with it. And because of all that's been found wrong with it, it's the general opinion is that it's almost certainly not authentic. The Truman-Forrestal memo, which is included with the Eisenhower briefing document and the roll of film, also was shown that Truman's signature was exactly like another signature that a person, a researcher turned up. I believe it was either Phil Klass or another researcher. And forensic people will tell you that no two signatures are exactly the same, but this thing fit to a T. So this led to the suspicion that it was a cut and paste job. Somebody had copied Truman's signature and then pasted it on a fake document. So the common wisdom among serious researchers is that this set of documents is not authentic, that they're fake. Mm-hmm. The question is, did it contain any information that's interesting?
Right.
For example, if a saucer or if a UFO had been recovered in New Mexico in 1947, it seems almost certainly that it would have been handled under extreme secrecy. Mm-hmm. And it wouldn't surprise us at all if a secret committee was formed to study it. Now, maybe it wasn't called MJ-12, or maybe there was actually an MJ-12 committee, but it didn't have anything to do with UFOs. So this gets into this whole idea of the UFO field being fed disinformation and misinformation. We get into all that.
Right. And I always think that, with disinformation, any good disinformation agent is going to mix in a kernel of truth. So in these documents, how can we know what might be real and what isn't? Or is there anything real in any of it?
Well, I don't know if we really can know without some kind of confirmation, from authorities. There are a whole lot of documents that came through Timothy Cooper in the 1990s, and a couple of them are like General Twining reporting on his findings, of looking into what was recovered in New Mexico, and you read it and it's very intriguing. But some of these documents that were in this group have misspellings and typos, and it just doesn't look like something that would be produced on that high of a level. One or two other documents were discovered to have been a cut and paste job. somebody took a legitimate document and then stuck in General Twining's name or somebody, on it, and it was, appeared to be fake from that standpoint. So I think if you look at the whole spectrum of the MJ12 documents from the early 80s up through almost the present time, that there's too much in there that's interesting. The whole scenario is too interesting, even if it doesn't have anything to do with UFOs, because somebody is working, at least from my point of view, is working on a long-term project to inject memes, into the public domain. And the question is why, and what is it all about?
Right. So why? What is it all about, Tom?
Well, I wrote a little research paper on my blog called MJ12, The Counterintelligence Angle.
Yep.
And you mentioned that in my intro that I'm looking into AFOSI right now. And in doing that, I've been reading some government documents.
Yeah.
And these are things like, the Atomic Energy Act and the National Security Act and several government directives and directives on, how the intelligence agencies within the Department of Defense are supposed to operate. And Luis Elizondo has mentioned this in his interviews, but because of the way the laws have been written, the defense establishment is supposed to be focused and concerned with foreign problems. They're not supposed to be turned in on the American people. And that's, if there's something going on in the United States, then the FBI is supposed to handle that. So the Air Force Office of Special Investigations is mainly concerned with ordinary types of crimes within the Air Force, like theft or drugs or things like that. But the Air Force Office of Special Investigations also handles counterintelligence. Okay. So even if it's something domestic, if it has something to do with a foreign input or foreign involvement with espionage or security or maybe leaking of confidential or classified information, then the AFOSI can get involved in that. And in reading these directives and policies, well, let me put it this way. The UFO groups think that the government we like to think that the government watches everything we do and that they follow us and they spy on us and they want to know what we're up to. Well, that's actually true to a certain extent. And the reason for it is directly in the policies, these government policies that I'm referring to, and I can give you the names of the policies that I've looked at, but they explicitly state that open source information is okay. Okay. So people in AFOSI, if they're following the UFO groups, they can go on the internet and they can look at everything everybody else looks at. They can also attend UFO conferences. For example, I'm with MUFON, and we put on a symposium every year. Anybody can attend. If you pay the entrance fee, you can attend. So even government people acting really within their own jobs can attend like a MUFON symposium or this or that UFO conference. So that much we know I know for certain that's okay. The question is, do they get involved in following things beyond that? And that's where we get into the counterintelligence question, because and I mentioned this in my paper, but in the 1960s, the CIA apparently became aware that the Soviets might approach certain people in the UFO field to cultivate them, hoping to get certain types of information. So this Now, when you get into that, then you're directly getting into counterintelligence concerns. And the agencies within the intelligence establishment and AFOSI, for example, can get involved if they think that there might be some kind of some type of espionage threat or counter espionage problem. Okay, so that's where this connection with looking at UFO groups and looking at UFO literature, attending UFO conferences, it might intersect with some kind of uh, counterintelligence issue.
So they're thinking that there might be an espionage segment to the UFO groups. Is that correct?
Well, I don't think that UFO people are a bunch of spies reporting to China. I don't think that's the problem. But yeah, as I pointed out in my paper, now this whole question arose out of this whole controversy that came from the so-called Benowitz affair in the 1980s. Mm-hmm. And during the Benowitz affair, AFOSI, and namely Richard Doty, who is an AFOSI special agent, they were, talking to Paul Benowitz, and they were looking at what he was doing. And they had reason to do that because Paul Benowitz was sitting on his porch. He had telescopes, he had cameras, he had electronic equipment. He was capturing data off of Kirtland Air Force Base. Kirtland Air Force Base was involved in a number of highly classified activities at the time. So AFOSI got involved. Now, there's another kind of subtle distinction that people need to realize is that they can get involved with you if you do it voluntarily. Now, in Paul Benowitz, he voluntarily came into Kirtland Air Force Base and said, "Hey, you've got UFOs over your base." Okay, and they eventually put some people on the case, Richard Doty being one of them, and they asked him, "Do you mind if we come out to your house and see what you're doing?" Well, Benowitz was a UFO enthusiast, okay, and he was just, he was just full of enthusiasm about tracking UFOs. So he said, "Yeah, come on over." So they came over. They came over to his house. They saw the equipment that he was using. They kind of surreptitiously looked around, without, being too nosy, but kind of scoping the place out. He did that voluntarily, okay? Yeah. And a lot of people in the UFO field, the sinister AFOSI was engaging in these nefarious activities to drive Paul Benowitz crazy. And it's not that cut and dried. It's not that black and white. And you have to realize, too, that AFOSI special agents or any other agents of the government, they're supposed to, and I think by and large, they follow their legal requirements. They stay within the law. Now, I'm not saying in every instance the government has stayed within the law, but by and large, they do. And a special agent going to a person's house right next to an Air Force base, and this person is a UFO enthusiast, and he's basically spying on the base's activities, okay? Mm-hmm. When they get involved, they're doing it in theory, they're doing it according to the book. And if they're going to go any further than that, they can and do get approval from above. Mm-hmm. Okay. So even though they're not supposed to mess with domestic persons, if they feel that they need to, they can go higher in the chain of command and get permission to do certain things that they feel that they need to do to collect information. Now, somehow in all of the Benowitz affair, the Soviets may have been, or maybe agents or informers for the Soviet Union may have been picking up on what Benowitz was doing. And that may be why they got so involved. Now, we know the AFOSI was involved at the time. and probably also the National Security Agency were spying on Paul Bennett. So these are things that, even though UFOs were nominally involved in the affair, that you can make a very strong argument that it was a counterintelligence investigation.
Okay. So it was more to the fact that simply he was, in essence, spying on the base rather than the UFOs he was looking for.
Right. And now, but here's the interesting side of it, is that Richard Doty, who became very infamous out of this whole affair, has stuck publicly with the line that he was briefed by the Air Force. A colonel came down from Washington and briefed him and several other people on what the government knew about UFOs. And he was told that, and they were shown films and all of this information, that the government had recovered a UFO in Roswell in 1947, that one of the aliens, one of the beings, survived until 1952, that there were actually 2 UFO crashes. The second crash was, and this is at the same time, but the second crash was at this location called Horse Mesa, which is in southwest New Mexico, and nobody survived that, and the saucer wasn't found until years later. And Doty is still saying that to this day. So, we're left with the question now, when we get into the MJ-12 subject: is it disinformation? Is it counterintelligence somehow, to manipulate this or that? Or are UFOs really involved with it? Maybe is there some group in the government maybe that wants information to get out, and they found a way to do it by putting out these phony documents? Okay. And the analogy I like to draw is, Lynn, let's say that I forge a letter that is purportedly by you. Okay, the letter's phony, but it might contain correct information. For example, I happen to know that you went to the grocery store at Tuesday at 8 p.m., and that's in the letter. So the letter actually contains accurate information, even though the letter itself is forged. Okay.
Right.
And so if they produce documents that are forged, and Grant Cameron has articulated this theory for a long time, but it provides plausible deniability. So you have a scenario where certain memes, certain ideas, certain concepts are introduced into the public domain, while at the same time being able to deny it. Okay. Yeah. And this may be the game that's being played.
Right. So, okay, Richard Doty, he's he's a controversial character. So he is talking to us and telling us he was briefed on all of, on the UFO subject, but he also has told us that he was a disinformation agent, basically. So how can we believe anything that he says at this point?
Well, unless he's still being employed by the Air Force or by the government, he's telling us now, today, he just recently spoke at a conference. I happen to have a DVD of that, but he's saying today that he's not working for the government, that he's speaking on his own account, on his own behalf. So now I'm not saying that I can attest that everything that he says is, on the level. Lots of people who don't work for the government don't always tell the truth about everything, but by and large, if the question is, if he is telling the truth, then this is very important information. And what now? One question that I have, and that one thing that doesn't make a lot of sense to me, is that Doty has been making these really sensational allegations about, the recovery of the craft, and he's told stories about activities that the Air Force is engaged in vis-a-vis aliens and things. But why is he the only one saying this? Okay,
Mm-hmm.
he's the only AFOSI special agent that is going out and talking about this. Mm-hmm. And if what he's saying is true, if the government is so involved in all of this, like he's saying, there have got to be a lot of other agents out there that know about this, and none of them are talking. And now he says that, he's cleared some of this or he's at least run it past certain people. And he also, when he does talk about this, he only goes so far, and he won't talk about anything that's still classified. And he claims that the things that he has talked about are, he's not talking about any classified information. But the fact that the government had recovered saucer and bodies and been in contact with aliens and all that, I would think that that's still classified. So,
right.
I have my questions about all this too.
Yeah. You would think if it's not classified information, we could find something in the documents that we have access to support what he's saying.
Right. And that's a problem that we have in the UFO community, Lynn, is that we have all kinds of claims being made, all kinds of stories being told, all kinds of allegations, and very little documentation to support it.
Right.
Now, there are a lot of legitimate government documents out there.
Mm-hmm.
John Greenwald, for example, has thousands, millions of them. And that's what he goes by. If you go by the documents that are released under the Freedom of Information Act, then you have something to go on there. But then we get into this scenario where, questionable documents are being introduced into the public domain. Now that fascinates me. Now, some people, they don't want to have anything to do with it. Oh, those are phony. I don't believe it's all phony. But why is it going on? And the idea that you have some guy in his underwear in the basement living with his mother at 2 a.m. eating cold pizza, forging documents, that just doesn't fly with me. I think there's more to it than that.
Yeah, I agree. Okay, so Solar Warden has been waiting very patiently. He wants to know, Spaced Out Radio, has Tom ever spoken to Rick Doty personally?
I've had limited contact with Richard Doty, and I've requested an interview with him. I did that months ago, and he declined. I think eventually I'll run into him in person, and maybe I'll get down. I'd like to sit down and have a cup of coffee with him, because there are certain things. It's not so much about the UFOs that I want to know about it. It's more about the questions I'd like to ask him are about some of the ins and outs with AFOSI and how the intelligence agencies work, and about some of these, obvious disconnects. Why is he the only one that's talking? What's really going on there? Now, Richard Doty, he's claimed that his father was involved was in the Air Force. His uncle investigated UFOs, and I've got there's a document in this work that was produced by the Air Force by Colonel Weaver that has Edward Doty document in there from Edward Doty. Now, it doesn't have anything to do with crashed saucers or aliens. It has something to do with an unrelated item, but there's a document in that, right there that has Edward Doty in there. So, I think my impression is that Doty is, I think he's trying to get some information out to the public. I do.
Really?
What I don't understand is how he can do that without getting in trouble.
Right. So Angels has this question: hasn't Doty signed an NDA? And since he's talking, why hasn't the government put him in prison? It's a good question.
Well, okay. Now, Doty says that, he was under confidentiality for 20 years after he left the Air Force, and that had expired. So he's no longer bound by his NDA. Now, at the same time, I mean, you just simply don't disclose information that's still classified. And Doty's given a number of interviews. I have notes on about 15 interviews that he's given, and including this latest one that he came out with. And he clearly says when he's talking about this stuff that well, this isn't classified anymore. I can talk about that, or he'll say this, this is classified and I can't get into that.
I don't know. I still have trouble trusting him.
Well, that's what he says. Now, you would think that if you were exposed to such extremely sensitive information, like, the government has recovered UFOs and all that you'd be sworn to secrecy for life. Okay. But maybe there are some ins and outs of that I don't understand. Maybe he has a tacit green light, from the Pentagon. Go ahead. Nobody's going to believe you after the Benowitz affair. So.
That is true. That is true. Or perhaps they're thinking, well, nobody's going to believe you, so go ahead and say it. But then if he's really saying it, is he putting the information out there only to confuse us even further?
But why? I mean, what does he have to gain from that? I mean, he's threatened to write a book, and he said that, that he had like about a 400-page book written, and he had to run it up the flagpole, at the Pentagon and get it approved. And he said they cut out 300 pages of it. So, there's and he said, I mean, I've got notes, and I can refer to, whatever interview he's given when he said that. But, there's still that aspect of confidentiality and classified information. And that gets into the whole subject of the Air Force not wanting to talk about this at all. Okay. Mm-hmm. I mean, they don't want to talk about UFOs publicly. They don't want to get into it. And that's evidenced by this latest report that's come out, on June 25. It's all the 145 incidents that they had in there. They're all Navy. None of them are from the Air Force. And the Air Force, I've heard, kind of through the grapevine, that the Air Force told the UAP task force, go, knock yourselves out. We're not having anything to do with it. So
yeah. Well, my dad was a colonel in the Air Force. I could see that.
Yeah,
for sure.
Well, and when you look at what goes on in the government and the UFO field, there's so many discrepancies and anomalies and disconnects that for a person like me, now, I spend all my time doing this, so I notice these things, but some things just don't add up. For example, this report, this preliminary assessment, unidentified aerial phenomena, they didn't just produce this for nobody. It went to the Director of National Intelligence. Okay. Mm-hmm. The Director of National Intelligence reports directly to the President and to the National Security Council and to the Homeland Security Council and all that. The Director of National Intelligence legally can insist on gathering this intelligence from all of the intelligence agencies. The CIA, the NSA, the service intelligence branches, the NGA, the National Geospatial Intelligence Agency, and so on and so forth. And what's happened is at least one agency, particularly, namely the Air Force, apparently came back and said, "We're not giving you nothing." Okay. Oh. And now, if I was the Director of National Intelligence, I'd go back and I'd say, "You're fired."
Yeah.
But I don't really know how the government works. And maybe the Director of National Intelligence is like, well, I don't want to get my fingerprints all over this, this mess. So I'll just let it go. But, that to me is an obvious discrepancy. Now, just because you're a senator and you're running a committee doesn't mean that, and you ask for information from, agencies on the executive side, that doesn't necessarily mean they're going to give you the information. Okay,
Right.
it happens all the time. Congressional committees they'll conduct an investigation. They'll request information from various agencies, from the Justice Department, and so on and so forth. And sometimes they just get stonewalled. Okay. And they don't, or they slow roll it and it takes a long time. And hopefully the news cycle will get to where they don't care about it anymore and they have something else to worry about. And that could certainly be an aspect with this report.
Oh, I agree. They just drip feed us and drag it out as long as they possibly can.
Yeah. And Lou Elizondo has said himself that, and I don't have any trouble believing this at all, but he said ordinarily in the Pentagon, if you were going to investigate something like this, like UAPs, it would take you 6 months to get all the tickets punched that you need to get punched, just to get clearances to get the information. So it might have been a little bit of trouble for this huge UAP task force of 2 people, to gather very much information in the short space of 6 months.
Right. So how much more are they going to give us? They said in the report that they would be giving an update in 90 days. How much more are they going to really be able to gather in 90 days?
Well, there's a difference between what is classified and what might be presented confidentially to congressional committees. There's a difference between that and what we as the public are going to see. Okay.
Yeah.
And now I will say this, the very fact that we've gotten this far, I mean, we ought to be glad that we've gotten this much,
Something.
And it is a step forward. I mean, it's definitely a change in the pattern, but it remains to be seen if it's going to be sustained in the long run. Okay.
True.
Because composition of the Senate committees can change, the committee can change, the president can change, the DIA, the DNA, the DNI could change, and life goes on and they're on their merry way, dealing with other priorities. And I, the thing about you got me talking here. Okay. I hope you don't mind.
No, go for it.
The thing about the UFO community is that we think that they don't have anything else to think about except UFOs like we do. I mean, the Defense Department, the service branches, even, all the executive departments have so many priorities and so many things to do. They can't even get them all done. Okay. And they don't want to deal with UFOs. They have 100 other things on their to-do list that they need, that they need to get done. So, and sometimes we think that UFOs should be the top priority, and it's not.
Yeah. Well, I can see why people would think that, because, if they do have information on UFOs, or even if we go a step further, extraterrestrials, I mean, that would be a huge amount of information for the public to know. And that would pertain to so many different aspects of our lives, not necessarily just the curiosity of UFOs. But I do understand what you're saying. They do have a million other things that they're dealing with as well. So, I mean, it'll be interesting to see what happens with it. I really don't know, but I'm just sitting back with my popcorn and waiting to see. But it'll be interesting.
Well, I'm not saying that I don't want it to. I mean, I'm a UFO person. I want disclosure as much as anybody, as much or more. But here's the problem. I'm kind of an old sea dog. I've been around in this field since the 1990s, and I've seen people come out. I mean, when I first became convinced that we were really onto something here, okay, I felt, there should be disclosure. The government has got to come out and inform the public about this. And sometimes that's your first reaction. You get that flush of a kind of a passionate expectation.
Yeah.
I see that going with a lot of people now. A lot of people are new to the field, and I understand that. But you go through these cycles, and people coming out and under, kind of rumors in the background that something's going to happen, and there's going to be disclosure, and their hopes, and people get their hopes up, and then they're dashed, and I just advise caution, because the issue of extraterrestrial visitation, or what I call intraterrestrial activity, that is, if they're here on Earth, like in mountains or underground or something.
Yeah.
The exposure of that is, totally, completely, utterly explosive. I mean, it would change everything. Okay. That's why they're not going to disclose it, because it'll upset the status quo. Okay. So I just think, I want disclosure, but I just think we should be realistic, and we should be careful, because this is not just an ordinary mundane problem here. And if you look at the track record of the Air Force and of the government in dealing with the subject, it's not encouraging.
Yeah. Yeah. Dave wants to know, does Tom think the June 25th report honest or more disinformation with respect to the U.S. needing more understanding of the tech we've been seeing?
I think it's basically honest, but it's very limited. As the public, we're fed breadcrumbs, because the first reports and rumors that came out when this was released was that the congressional committees got another 70 pages, 70 or 80 pages, possibly some very good stuff. Okay. So we're getting the crumbs from the banquet table.
Yeah.
But I do think it's like I was saying, the people, the worker bees, the people on the UAP task force, I'm sure they're doing their jobs as best they can. They're honest, and they're trying to do the best job that they can within the whatever constraints are placed on them. Okay. And I think the report is basically honest, even though there are several things that I noticed that I just don't think really add up. And it's not so much that they're lying, but they're dealing with the public, and I'm sure they don't want to get the public all stirred up. So that's
But then again, by not giving us very much information, they're also getting us stirred up too. So I think there's a fine balance they're going to have to figure out.
Well, we in the UFO field are outraged. Of course, we're normally outraged anyway, but
we're jaded.
The general public is not outraged, but we can hope that this development is going to increase public knowledge and awareness. And one of my hopes is that this will inspire this whole trend toward the government admitting a little something here and there will maybe inspire some of these more capable investigative journalists to really start digging into this. And if they do, maybe they can turn something up. Now, there is an investigative journalist from Australia by the name of Ross Coulthart. I don't know if you've heard of him, but he had been in the U.S. for some time. Talking to a lot of people. He's getting ready to come out with a book. Currently, he's giving interviews on podcasts. That's Ross Coulthart from Australia, and he's like 60 Minutes Australia level investigative journalist. So he's really onto the subject, and he's working hard on it. And we know that we've had Ralph Blumenthal and Leslie Kean, pitching stories to the New York Times. Yeah. But the problem is, when you get into this whole subject of recovered UFOs and bodies and all of that, you got to have people that will go on the record. Okay. If if you're going to have a story in the New York Times or the Washington Post or whatever, and about recovered saucers, if you don't have the physical proof, you got to have credible people that will go on the record, and they haven't been able to get that far yet. The investigative journalists that have gotten into this, the ones that I've mentioned, they haven't been able to get people to go on, publicly on the record.
Okay, well, let's tie something a little bit together here then. If they haven't been able to get anyone to go on record, and Richard Doty is saying he's being truthful about the information that he's received, why isn't there a connection there?
Well, that's a good question. And that's a discrepancy that I haven't been able to resolve yet. Okay.
Yeah.
I'm not a Doty hater, and I'm not saying he's just a liar and you can't believe anything he does, but there are some, pretty obvious discrepancies here.
Yeah.
That don't seem to add up. But just because there's a discrepancy doesn't necessarily mean that there's a falsehood. It's that we're lacking information, or something's missing somewhere, and we need more information from other sources that would explain this.
Yeah. So Chad wants to know, do you think other civilizations, and I asked him to clarify this, and he had said past civilizations like the Roman Empire, did they try hiding the UFO phenomena as well, in your opinion?
Well, they probably they had their own system of interpreting the world. The Romans had their own system. And in ancient times, at the time of the Roman Empire, you had a number of different pagan type religions. You had the Roman version and the Greek version and the Near East versions and the Egyptian version and all these different religions. So they seem to interpret these kind of activities, events as gods, as actions of gods. And the Romans were big on, interpreting the flights of birds and things like that. So who knows how they interpreted what, if they saw a UFO fly past, I'm sure they weren't thinking they were from Mars, that they were from spacemen. They were probably thinking something entirely different.
Right. Yeah, it's interesting. There definitely is. So my minor is in art history, and there is a lot of, as most people know, what look like UFOs depicted in a lot of classical paintings. And, everybody who's more mainstream has different things that they think those are, whether it's, a chariot of God that they represented in this fashion, or there's a million other things that even then, and this was even before I got into UFOs, that I was just kind of like, it looks like a UFO. So it's interesting that these past civilizations, and even just in past ages, that there seems like there was some interest in things that they saw around them that they were trying to figure out or trying to identify, but we just don't have the information. And I wish that we did. It'd be fascinating to know what they thought of it all.
Well, it's very possible, and we've all seen, the faces on the cave wall and the, the objects in the Renaissance painting, this painting and that. But I'm not saying they're not UFOs. They very well may be, but I think to be objective about it, to be rational about it, we'd want to check. Okay, we've got these objects on this painting, and talk to other experts in art history and in history, and get their explanation of what that is or what it could be. Now, they could be biased themselves and they could be wrong, but you want to look at both sides of it. And people, I won't say cherry pick is too hard of a word, but people kind of pick out these certain images that seem to suggest, UFOs or aliens, but is it really a substantial, segment of the artistic inventory over the ages? Maybe it, I would argue it's probably rather thin based on what we have. And I'm not saying they're not UFOs, but I just think we should be careful and be, rational about these things and make sure we don't have alternate explanations that make sense. And if you can't come up with anything that explains it, that's halfway fair, then maybe it really is something. Now, there's a book that Jacques Vallée came out with called Wonders in the Sky. I think he has a co-author. I think I have it on my bookshelf, but they go back all the way to ancient times, catalog all of these things that have been seen and that have happened. And it's really, when you look at their historical record, it is pretty substantial.
Yeah, there's quite a bit.
I'm not going to sit here and argue, they weren't seeing UFOs back in ancient times. I'm sure they assuming that UFOs exist and this is really a true phenomenon, I'm sure they did see them. And I'm sure that the primitive people saw them.
Right. And I think that's, I agree that we do need to keep an open mind. I'm always the first person to say, okay, well, what are the other options that it could have been, the other possibilities? But I think a lot of people that are not in the UFO community, a UFO is not going to be in the possibilities of what it could be in their opinions. Some of them are so closed off, so we can't be completely open-minded if we're closed off to one possibility. And that's the only issue that I find, like when I was in school and we were talking about these things, it was kind of like, well, that's not even a possibility. So we're going to kind of figure out what it might be. So it's tough. It's tough to find that balance.
Yeah. And that would be frustrating, but it's just a fact of life that a lot of people that have been raised in traditional American education, at the higher levels, getting the master and PhD levels, they tend to have a rather materialistic interpretation of phenomena, and they're not open to, some of the things that we're open to as UFO people. Right. That would be frustrating at times. But at the same time, if you're going to win them over, you got to have some evidence. You got to have more than just one or two flimsy little events or pieces of evidence too.
Yeah, though I've got to say, even with science now backing us up, not backing us up necessarily, but saying there are all these billions of planets out there that we're discovering that could potentially host life, that's got to open people's minds up a little bit, that there is the possibility that we aren't the most advanced civilization out there. That maybe, just maybe, there's a civilization millions of years more advanced than us, and they might have figured out how to come here. Just thinking.
Well, the sheer numbers of stars and galaxies, the way I like to put it is that we'd have to be living in the most statistically weird universe imaginable for us to be the only planet in the universe that's sustaining intelligent life. But for the science people, the ones that are trained in traditional scientific education, they just think we're too far apart. It's too far to go, based on our present level of knowledge and understanding of the speed of light. And you look at our technological capabilities. We use rockets and jets, and they can only go so fast. Even if you got up to, say, you had a nuclear propelled engine, got out there past Earth orbit and really started getting up some speed. I mean, even if you went at the speed of light, I mean, if something's 10 light years away and you're traveling at the speed of light, it's going to take you 10 years to get there.
Right. So yeah. Unless they know how to manage wormholes, then maybe.
Well, yeah. And if they're coming from other planets, then they obviously have some technology that's way beyond anything that we have. And it's operating out of principles that we don't understand yet. And that's why, I think people like us who are in the UFO field, we try to be more open-minded, because if the UFO phenomenon is real, there seem to be three basic possibilities. Either they're extraterrestrial, or they're what I call intraterrestrial. They're living here on Earth, or they're interdimensional, and we don't even know what that means. Okay,
Yeah.
I really, when it comes right down to it. Yeah. So if they're extraterrestrial in origin, then by definition they have technology that enables them to get here.
Right.
You know, we just don't understand it yet.
Yeah.
And that's where having a little bit of an open mind comes in.
Right.
And there are scientists that, like Hal Puthoff and others that are trying to find ways that this could be possible. And, you got quantum physics and physicists talking about wormholes and all this, and it's at a theoretical level right now, but maybe they can find a way. It seems to be something to do with gravity, manipulating gravity.
Yeah.
Manipulating space-time. And that's easy to say, but actually doing it is, that's a whole nother question.
Right. Okay, we have a lot of questions that people have asked, so I want to get to some of these. So the first one, what happened in the 1990s that Tom felt there are UFOs, aliens among us?
What really got me believing this was the literature by Leonard Stringfield. And Leonard Stringfield was a longtime UFO researcher. And he actually cooperated with the Air Force and served as something of an informer. They gave him a telephone line, and he would call in, UFO reports that he was getting. I think that was back in the 1950s. He wrote a book called Situation Red, the UFO Siege. And Leonard Stringfield was from Cincinnati, Ohio. He was employed there and lived there. And that whole part of the country, the Ohio Valley, Kentucky, West Virginia, Ohio, just had a tremendous amount of UFO activity going on there. So he wrote a book called Situation Red, UFO Siege. And one of the chapters was about saucer recoveries. And he started collecting these stories of the government recovering crashed UFOs. And he came out with what he called status reports, status report 1, 2, so on and so forth. Mm-hmm. And I was reading those, and along with the other UFO literature, that's how I became convinced.
Okay. Spanish Fly says, fellow San Antonian here, what roles do the Air Force bases here in town have in this?
Good question.
Mm-hmm.
Well, actually, Air Force intelligence was at one time based at Kelly Air Force Base, security service. And I'm really not up on what exactly the configuration is on this. It's all Lackland now because Kelly was shut down after a round of base closures. But we have to remember that it's all government property. Okay, Lackland Air Force Base. That I think at one time they may have had nuclear material stored on the Lackland Annex. And now Lackland itself is a training base. It's where the basic military trainees come through. And I was actually employed on the credit union there for a number of years. And then next to that at Kelly was the security service. Now you have now another base that had been closed was I forget the name of the base. I'm having a senior moment, but it was basically the Air Force aeromedical base where they did a lot of the testing and evaluation of the astronauts there. Brooks Air Force Base. And then you also have Randolph Air Force Base where they train pilots. They train fighter pilots. Now, when you read the crash saucer literature, at times you'll run across an allegation that the bodies were taken to Randolph Air Force Base and this and that. So, but that's going back in history. And I'm sorry I can't be more specific about what was the security service, but it's on Kelly, and I'm sure they're engaging in very important work.
Yeah. Absolutely. Okay, so Angel says, Tom, ridiculous question. Want to know your opinion. What would happen if a hidden book I know exists ever came out publicly that shows the U.S. government has known since the 30s and 40s, thousands of government documents and evidence?
Can I have a copy of it? I'll give you my email. Or can you photograph it and send it to me by email, or
right?
Yeah. No, I think
like that too.
I mean, look, what we need documentation. We need evidence. Okay. We've got stories and allegations coming out the yin yang. Okay. What we need is solid documentation and evidence. Okay. Now, it seems like the more fantastic the claims are in a document, the more likely it is to be discredited. So, that's always a possibility. If somebody has a book or a document or a report or something that's really hot, I'd love to see it as far as as long as I'm not breaking some law, and let's take a look at it. Okay. But all of the documents that have claimed that we have recovered UFOs, et cetera, have been considered to be, phony. People consider them to be hoaxes, to be not authentic. Now, there are so many documents in the Timothy Cooper batch that I don't think the critics and the scrutinizers have really gone through them in the way that they went through the Eisenhower briefing document. And so there may be some possibilities there.
So what do you think would happen say there was a book or something, some sort of documentation that showed the U.S. government did know about UFOs or extraterrestrials or interterrestrial or whatever, any other type of being since the 30s and 40s. How do you think the public would react to that?
Well, like I said, it's likely that there are people that would go through it and would take a close look at it and would find something wrong and claim that it's phony. That's the first possibility. The second possibility is that the second scenario is it would just be ignored. That's old historical stuff, and you can't. It's like anything else in life. You've got to have a chain of custody. You have to have a documented record of the provenance of something. So let's say I've got this here book, I've got this here report. It's dated 1942. It proves that UFOs are extraterrestrial. Okay, well, where did it come from? Where did you get it? Did it come from a government agency? Did it come from a government archive? Or did it just appear in somebody's mailbox? Okay. Now, that doesn't mean it's phony on the face of it, but to get somewhere with something, you have to know the provenance, and you have to have a chain of custody. And when you have that, and you have a document that under scrutiny or that stands up under scrutiny, then you have something. Okay. And then you deal with it from there. But we haven't gotten to that point yet. Right.
Do you think that there would be panic? Like, I know a lot of people say there would be worldwide panic. I don't think that. I have, I guess, a little more faith in the public. Would there be segments of the population that might be panicking? Yes, of course. But I think overall, one, like you said, people are going to be like, it's probably not true. And two, I think they'd be fine with it. I think it would be an adjustment, but I think people would be absolutely fine with it.
Well, I'm not sure about that. There's a difference between thinking about UFOs and contemplating UFOs, and there's a difference between that and really knowing for sure that it really is true, that you have to believe it. Okay. And there's a big difference there. Now, where we're at right now, we got lots of UFO people like me and like us that think about this all the time, and we believe it, and we don't have any problem with it. But what if, okay, for example, there's this whole history of abductions and people claiming they're abducted, and some of it is unpleasant, and they've reported all kinds of entities and beings, entity types and beings have been reported.
Right.
And if somehow it was all disclosed and people had to believe that it really is real, then aren't some people going to start wondering, am I going to get abducted too? Okay. And start looking into it, and they start finding out what's really been going on. I could see some people panicking. I could see panic. In fact, there's some of the talk on the UFO street during the 90s was that whoever's controlling all this, whatever's controlling it, is concerned that there would be suicides. You know, that some, if the truth really came out, that some people would commit suicide, and they don't want that to happen. When people have a set view on something, and you're presented with the opposite, they commonly refer to it as cognitive dissonance, but it's serious material cognitive dissonance. You know, it's not like finding out, well, I'm not the best tennis player on the team. It's like finding out maybe God doesn't exist. Maybe Jesus Christ isn't who we think it is. Maybe we're subjected to things that are completely out of control, and we're at their mercy. Okay. It's a kind of a scenario that is really could be serious. Now, I'm not advocating that they shouldn't disclose anything, but we don't know what it is that they have to disclose, assuming that they do. Okay.
Yeah.
And I tell people, you need to be careful what you ask for. What if it's bad news? I mean, we like to think that, you know, it's fascinating. The aliens it's wonderful. And that is an aspect of this, is wonder. But what if it's bad news? What if it's like they say, you don't ask questions that you don't want to hear the answer to. Okay. And that could be an aspect to all of this.
It certainly could. I guess my response would be, well, that's already been going on and we're all relatively fine. But I find it fascinating. So, you know, my background is in psychology. I used to be a therapist. And I think people are much more adaptable than we give them credit for. And yes, there would be a certain segment of the population that would have a difficult time with this. Would there be people committing suicide over it? Not a lot. Like, I really don't think it would be a lot of people. Would they need time to process it? Yes. Should they get all of the information at once? Absolutely not. But I think if it's done correctly, I think the general public would be adaptable to it. They would be okay with it.
You may be right. You know, you may be right. But if the situation really is that reasonable, then why haven't they disclosed it?
Maybe because they've been doing things for this many years and have been lying about it, and they don't want to look bad.
Well, that's a rational explanation right there. I mean, how do you, and I've said this before, and you know, I've been on several shows, but I said this before, but how do you go public and say, we've been lying to you for 70 years?
Exactly. Okay. I think that's the biggest reason. All right. So Jim has been waiting a while to ask this question. At Space Out Radio, how much control does Congress have over UFO disclosure? What could make the aspects of government not under congressional oversight disclose what they know? It's a good question.
The way our Constitution is set up with a system of checks and balances, that the executive carries out the laws of the Constitution and the laws that the Congress passed. Now, in theory, the Congress can defund anything. But we've got to be realistic. You go back and you look at, say, the Vietnam War.
Mm-hmm.
The Vietnam War went on basically from 1960 until about maybe as late as 75, really, when you look at the whole process. In theory, Congress could have defunded that whole war. They could have put a stop to it anytime they wanted to, if they really wanted to, but they didn't. Okay. And how much power do they have? Legally, they have the power to defund anything that they want to, but they don't do that. Okay. So it's not a matter of how much power they have. It's a matter of what realistically could happen. There's a saying that politics is the art of the possible. And in theory they could do something, but can you actually get it done? When you look at what's going on in the Congress today, that they don't seem to get things done that we think that they should get done. And it's all about politics. So how much power do they have? They have the power that they need. It's a matter of will, of seeing it as a priority, to carry out. And I just don't see them doing that.
Yeah. So Robert makes an interesting point. It's not just the government. The aliens we made deals with don't want everyone to know. And I suppose if we're going to be open-minded, that's a possibility as well. That maybe it's not on our end.
It's possible, but I wouldn't bet my, monthly salary on that.
Yeah, that's not the one I would be going with either. But again, it's a possibility, I suppose.
Yeah, it's a possibility. Sure, and I've heard this since the 90s. Yeah. It's not, it's not MJ-12 that's in control. It's the aliens that are in control. And who knows? Maybe that's true. But how are we going to know that?
Right. It could be an agreement on both sides. Again, we don't really know.
Yeah.
So, okay, so the MJ-12 been going on for quite some time, this phenomenon, right? And you said up until basically even the present. Do you think that there is any correlation with MJ-12 and any of the information that we've been receiving as of late, say the videos, or I don't necessarily know about anything in the UAP report, but anything that we've gotten recently that's been more leaked, do you think that might have anything to do with MJ-12 or the people who created MJ-12, whoever they may be?
Well, if we go by the scenario that there was a saucer recovered, at least one saucer recovered, and that an MJ-12 committee, type committee, was formed in the 40s and 50s, then over time, if you look at government agencies, especially in the military, they're constantly reorganizing and changing their names. And that's probably been the case with MJ-12. The committee has morphed and their responsibility have changed, and the organizational aspects have changed, and the name of the committee has changed. And I don't have it in front of me right now, but I've got a list in my file of 12 different names that MJ-12 has been alleged to have been called, COM-12 and this and that. So to answer your question, which I'm not sure I can remember at this point, but
it's all right, I can't either.
MJ-12, probably has morphed. Like, things change over time as people learn. Like, you look at the space program, they, over time in the military, they start out at a certain level and everybody's freaked out. They're trying to make something work, and they do it over and over. And after a number of years, they've got it down to a science. Okay. Yeah. And so maybe at the beginning of all this, if they recovered a saucer or more, they were all freaked out and they were trying to get the study organized. How are we going to handle this? And over time, it morphed. And maybe they didn't need a committee of 12 top scientists, running the thing. Maybe they, I tend to think that it's more like a matrix. And I don't mean the Matrix movie, but just the matrix of the military-industrial complex. There are certain select people, maybe somebody in the National Security Council, maybe somebody in the Defense Department, and so on and so forth, that maintain the secrecy on this. And even in the 90s, and having been around in a while, back in the 90s, we started hearing these rumors that the government had moved the saucer problem out of the government into private industry. We were hearing this way back in the 90s, okay? And now people are trying to pin down Lou Elizondo in this, and they've asked some pretty direct questions to, does Lockheed Martin have the saucer? Are they working on it? And he's been very cagey, and he's been very kind of evasive, and he's kind of danced around it. But if you read between the lines and look at his body language and look at listen to his tone, read his tone, he's basically saying yes. Okay. So Lockheed or somebody like that does have something that they're trying to back engineer. Now, he stated as much in a way, but if they're doing that, I think, and I just said this to a friend today on Twitter, but I think it was a stroke of genius when the government moved it, if they moved it into private industry, because they can truthfully say that they don't have it off the property. They got it off the property, and yet they're able to maintain control over it through these special access programs. The secrecy, and people are sworn to secrecy, and only the people that need to know about it know about it.
Yeah, it's a brilliant move on their part if that's true.
Yeah, and so now how is the whole thing managed? If they've been doing it since the 40s, they probably got the management side of it down by now. Okay, and maybe they don't need, maybe there is an MJ-12 committee, but maybe they don't need something like that anymore.
Yeah, well, I guess we'll just wait and see what happens. It's an interesting time.
It could only take another 70 years,
Right, yeah. So Sasquatch says, what do you make of the reported correlation between Bigfoot sightings maps and UFO sightings maps? Oh, so do you think there is a correlation between Bigfoot and UFOs?
I don't know. And no offense to anybody in the Bigfoot field. I don't get into Bigfoot because I have enough trouble understanding UFO history. Okay. And, you get into Bigfoot and ancient aliens and pyramids and all this Atlantis and all this stuff. I've been able to focus, in this MJ-12 area. And I've got a list of, about, well, at least 20 topics that I can study related to it within the scope of my own studies. So and is Bigfoot interesting? Yes. Bigfoot's fascinating. Is Loch Ness interesting? Yes. Loch Ness is fascinating. Yeah. If I'm going to get any work done, I have to focus on my area. So I focus on MJ-12. And I honestly don't know Bigfoot is a mystery. It's a mystery. And maybe it has something to do with UFOs. But if you're asking me if it does, I don't know. I don't have
Yeah. Well, Tom, you can only do so much. You're right. There is so much in this, if we call it all generally this field, there is so much that nobody can do everything. For sure. I thought this was an interesting comment. Ross Smith said, MJ-12 was real and my father was General Vandenberg's bodyguard.
Ross, I want to meet you.
Yeah. Absolutely.
I actually, I moved to Washington, D.C. for a while, and I was able to go to the National Archives, and I was able to go to the Library of Congress, Madison building, and before COVID, and then they shut everything down. But I went through General Twining's personal papers there, and also went through some of General Vandenberg's personal papers. And it's kind of fun to read, their transcripts of their phone calls and things like that. And there's nothing about UFOs, but true or false, Vandenberg is purported to be a key figure in this whole MJ-12 saga, if it existed. And, there's the whole concern that there was a report by the Air Force people that came to the conclusion that UFOs were extraterrestrial, and Vandenberg, told them to destroy all the copies and all that. So, and General Vandenberg was very, very influential and high up. He was the chief of staff of the Air Force, and unfortunately he died of cancer, I think in 1952 or 53. And then General Twining, I don't know if he became chief of staff. I think he probably became chief of staff right after that, because I think Twining was the number 2 guy. But fascinating. And Ross, I mean, you can get in touch with me at tomwhitmoreblog.wordpress.com, where I'll be glad to give you my email, phone number. I try to be transparent. I mean, I've got nothing to hide, so I want to talk to anybody that will talk to me that has useful information.
Yeah, for sure. So he put his email address, and Ross, I don't know if you saw, I said, send it. You can send it to my email if you want, and I'll forward it to Tom, so he has that info. So I have a question, Tom, and this, ever since I read the MJ-12 documents years ago, it kind of stuck in my head, and I've always wondered about it. And it's a topic that no other people have talked about, and that's one of the members of the MJ-12 group was a Bush. Now, we've had 2 Bush presidents as well. What is with the Bushes?
I don't think there's any relation there, as far as I know. No,
I heard there was. Maybe I'm wrong. I don't know.
I think I have Vannevar Bush's biography on my shelf back there.
Oh, okay. Then you probably know more than I do.
He was from Massachusetts, I believe. And, I'll check and see if there's a connection, but I don't think there is. Okay. That would certainly add to the whole conspiracy mentality. Right? But I don't think there's.
Because wasn't there something with George Bush Sr. that he was involved with something? I remember hearing something about him, but I can't for the life of me think of what it is right now.
Well, George Bush Sr. is purported to have refused Jimmy Carter the inside scoop on UFOs.
That's
because
what it is, yes.
At the time, George Bush Sr. was running the CIA, and he was, I think, running the CIA under the Gerald Ford administration. Mm-hmm. And then Carter got elected, and Carter was publicly interested in UFOs. He promised he'd release the UFO information, which proves that he didn't know much about the government history with UFOs. If he'd known a little bit more, he probably should have known that he shouldn't have made that promise. Even though later I read or heard somewhere that somebody asked him why he didn't release all the UFO information, and he said, "I thought we did, because they did release they did make the Blue Book files public,
So you think that was all he knew about?
Well, it depends on who you listen to and what you want to believe. There's a document, and this is an MJ-12 document that's referred to as the Carter briefing document. It's also known as the Aquarius briefing document, and it appeared under suspicious circumstances. It was shown to Linda Howe on Kirtland Air Force Base by Richard Doty. And it was also shown to Bill Moore, who had to go through a bunch of cloak and dagger, moves, and kind of he had to jump through these hoops, and he ended up at a hotel, and they gave him 19 minutes to look at it, and he photographed it. And I actually have I have copies of the photographs, with he put a coin on each page, for comparison. Now I've got a lot of MJ12 documents, but that's the so-called Carter briefing document. And in that document, that's basically the same idea. The government's recovered crash saucers. They have, and alien beings, and they have these different projects. And several of the project names that are mentioned in the so-called Carter briefing document showed up later in these rumors that were being spread by John Lear and this other guy. I can't remember his name right now, but it's a question document. Now, we hear these rumors and these stories because there are actually two versions of that document, and the other version is purportedly recapitulation from memory of the people that actually gave the briefing. In other words, they briefed the president, but it wasn't on paper. And then afterwards, by memory, they wrote down what they remembered of the briefing. So, but again, this is on the rumor level. So, you're asking how much Carter knew. Now, if that's true, if he was briefed. Now, there was another rumor that Carter ended up crying after the briefing,
Yeah, I heard that.
Versus bubble, but that's a rumor. I mean, I'm not saying it's true. I don't know, but this is part of UFO lore.
Yeah. Yeah. There's a lot of interesting tidbits about presidents in the UFO lore. Who was it? I think it was Nixon. Wasn't he reported to have taken, oh my gosh, I can't think of the actor's name. I know somebody will know what I'm talking about.
Jackie Gleason. Yeah, the story is
Jackie Gleason.
Nixon took Gleason to an Air Force base, and they went in and he saw
showed him the aliens or something like that.
The pickled aliens in the bottles,
Yeah. So, the pickled aliens.
Yeah.
I love it.
And Jackie Gleason's, now that story comes from Jackie Gleason's wife. And he supposedly had a UFO shaped house, and he just had a big UFO.
Really?
So he was, Gleason was a big UFO person. The other rumor about Nixon is that Nixon ordered all the hot UFO information to be destroyed. All the documentation about the, I guess, 12 type stuff. But that's rumor. There's no documented proof of that.
Yeah. Excalibur wants to know, has Tom tried to discover MJ12 scientists by looking through their publication history for work that might be tangentially connected to UFO research? Interesting.
That's an excellent question. And a serious researcher would do that. I haven't gotten that far. I did, when I was at the National Archives, they had a great reference library, and I went through the biographies of the purported MJ12 people, and the pattern that I found with them was that they, assuming they were actually in MJ12, but they got into science in the 1920s. They got in on the ground floor, so to speak, of developing really the substantive scientific disciplines in their respective areas. And for example, Vannevar Bush, he started the Raytheon company. We hear about that today. And some of these other scientists like Detlef Braun and others, they really they were pioneers in their field, and they helped build these scientific disciplines, and they got in on the ground floor in the 20s. So by the time the 40s came around, they were really at the top of their field, and they were top respected scientists.
So let's see. MJ12 group is also mentioned in Reagan briefing document. In the same document, 5 types of ET beings visiting the planet Earth also mentioned, and Dooley confirmed those types of beings. Do you know which document they're referring to?
Yeah, I've heard of the Reagan briefing document, and I have to profess ignorance because I haven't seen that. And I do need to look at that. Now, as far as the 5 types of aliens, I mean, we can list aliens, until we're blue in the face. I mean, there have been so many different ones reported, but the basic ones are the ebens, so-called ebens, and they're human-like. They have larger heads, they have larger eyes, but they are different from us. And then there's the little gray guys, the grays, and there are some variations of those, the little grays and the tall grays and large nose grays. Then you have your Nordic types who look like humans, with long blonde hair and all that good stuff. And then you get into some really weird, the mantis-like beings that I think you mentioned, Lynn. And there's these, Richard Doty has been talking about these Trantaloid types that are really truly scary looking. So, and there have been others. I remember going to a MUFON symposium, and they had, in a room, they had a display of drawings that abductees had they had given, created artistic representations of these beings that they had seen. And there's really quite a variety. And that's part of the reason why some of this whole abduction scenario is so confusing, because there are so many different types of beings being reported. And now some people will say there are 60, that may be a little high, but there's probably something in the neighborhood of 5 to maybe 15 beings that, have been doing all this.
Yeah. Poetically Mistaken says, does that mean there's no true documentation of a being known as Valiant Thor?
I'm pretty up on the UFO field. I hope you've noticed that, but I can't comment on Valiant Thor because I'm not sure what that is.
Valiant Thor was an ET that supposedly worked with the U.S. government. I can't remember what type of ET. I want to say maybe Nordic. I'm sure somebody out there will know, and they can tell us. But if you haven't heard of him, then I'm assuming you don't know of any documentation about him.
Unless it's the one like Frank Strange's, if it's associated with Frank Strange's Stranger in the Pentagon, if it's that.
I think it is. I think it is, if I'm remembering correctly.
Yeah. Does that mean there's no true documentation of it being noticed? Well, I've never seen any. And it's not that I've seen every document out there, or that I know I'm an expert on every document in the world, but it's, I think, a story. It might be an interesting story, but I'm not aware of any documentation.
Yeah. I was just watching this again last night, the Skinny Bob video. Have you seen this? I love Skinny Bob. What are your thoughts on Skinny Bob?
I attended a presentation. I think it was a local MUFON meeting. It was either Maryland or Virginia, and this person, I don't have his name in front of me, but he really had put a lot of effort and time into analyzing the Skinny Bob video, and I think his opinion was inconclusive. And I know my friend Sue Switek, who is the Virginia State Director for MUFON, she thinks that it's phony. I'm not knowledgeable about video analysis. Okay.
Yeah.
And I'm not qualified to judge it on a forensic level. So all I can say is, like so many things in the UFO field, it's interesting, but I can't really give an opinion one way or the other. I have a feeling that if we had the favor of full disclosure, that a lot of things that we've thought are phony or have actually been real.
Mm-hmm.
And it would be nice to get full disclosure so that we can shake this stuff out and figure out what's phony and what isn't.
Yeah, it would be nice to be able to do that for sure. Well, I think Skinny Bob is adorable, so in my mind, he's going to be real until they tell me differently.
I feel sorry for him,
I know. He's just standing there like,
just
what to do? I know. He was so cute. But you know what I do like about Skinny Bob is that he has a small little nose. And the reason I like that is because so many people, when they describe grays, describe them as having no nose, just two holes, right? And I like the fact that he wasn't, if he was created, whoever did this did a great job, because I like the fact that he wasn't exactly like how people describe a gray, because that would be too easy. So the fact that he had a little nose always got to me, like, maybe there's something to this, but I don't know.
Well, maybe someday we'll find out.
Yes, right. Though Excalibur says they found the guy who created Skinny Bob. I hadn't heard anything about that, but maybe they did. What's that?
Now, Richard Doty has said that there is a video on the internet that is a Russian. It's like a Russian recovery. But he said there is
Skinny
one.
Bob. Skinny Bob is Russian. I'm wondering if that's what he's talking about.
I don't know if he was talking about that one, but he said that there is one out there that is authentic.
Yeah, Skinny Bob supposedly was from Russia, of a recovered saucer that they found. But yeah, I don't know. I don't know. Hold on a second. I had seen something. Somebody was talking about a presentation. Oh wait. That Richard Doty. Oh, here we go. Okay. The 5 species, I think we're talking about ETs. The 5 species are called Ebens, archloids, is that right? Quadloids, hepaloids, and trentaloids in the Reagan briefing document. In Doty's presentation at Laughlin, Nevada 3 weeks ago, his slide had same types.
Yeah, and I wrote those down. He's referring to the same conference that I have a video of. And just a few days ago, I sat down and watched it and took notes, and I wrote down all those types. And I didn't want to try to recite from memory. Really go wrong.
I could barely read them, so I understand.
They're your Eben and your Gray and your Nordic and then that scary looking tranaloids.
Yes. Was it in the MJ12 documents, or am I thinking of something different, where they listed out a bunch of different types of ETs that they've had interactions with? Or am I thinking of something else?
I don't think so. I think it's been more just general UFO rumors. They're the kind of material that was being put out by John Lear's buddy. I can't remember his name right now, but he was listing grays and large nose grays and different ones, things like that. But
yeah,
I don't. Now the Eisenhower briefing document doesn't list different types, and I don't remember seeing any in the other MJ12 documents, like the Timothy Cooper type documents. I don't think, now I could be wrong, but I don't think the Psalm 1-01 document lists entity types. Now the Serpo story, I don't think lists different entity types. They talk about the entities in that story are allegedly the Ebens, the Roswell type beings that were recovered. And then this document, this what I call the ultra top secret document. I don't think that they list entities in there, even though it supposedly has an interview with an alien.
Yeah. I'll have to see if I can find it. It was years ago that I read it. I'll have to see if I can find it, and then I'll let you know what it was I'm thinking of. So Cat Chaser says, John Lear, Bob Lazar. I'm assuming they'd like to know your thoughts on both.
John Lear, I mean, I don't want to go out and criticize people publicly. And I'm not going to go out and say, so-and-so's full of it or any of that. But I just advise caution with anyone that is making claims and not providing supporting documentation. Okay. That covers a whole lot of people in the UFO field. But the Bob Lazar, now, Doty, I know I keep referring to him, but Doty says that Bob Lazar described the security procedures to get into S4. And Doty says that that matched what Bob Lazar has described, matches what it really is.
The hand, like bone scanner thing? Is that what you're referring to?
Like that. Yeah, I mean, part of it is some kind of physiological, anatomical checking. But at the same time, Richard Doty said that he was only allowed on the surface level. He wasn't cleared to go into S4, which he says is underground. So if he wasn't cleared to go into S4, then how would he know all of the security protocols to get through S4? Maybe he knew that, but he's claimed that Bob Lazar correctly had described all that. So that implies that at least Doty thinks that Lazar is probably legit. Now,
I've always thought he was.
And I just have to take a wait and see attitude on that. Now I've got a research friend that is absolutely adamant that that Lazar's a fake, that he's a phony. And he's never produced any diplomas of going to Caltech or wherever. Another UFO researcher has pointed out that he was an electronics technician, that he wasn't a physicist, that at Los Alamos he installed a satellite dish. That's what he was doing there. He's an electronic technician. Now that's not to say maybe he was an electronic technician at S4. Who knows?
Mm-hmm. Right. I mean, I've heard, people say the same thing where they weren't able to produce, his diplomas. But he made the argument, and I found this very compelling, that, obviously he was educated enough to get hired to work there. So there's got to be something to it, I think, personally. I just find him very sincere. Now, I will call BS on a lot of people in this field that, even some that I've recently mentioned that most people absolutely think are fantastic and 100% legit. And I will say, I don't know, but there's just something about Bob Lazar that I find very sincere and very credible.
He has been very consistent.
Mm-hmm.
There's been very little variation in his claims over the years.
Yeah.
And I don't think that he was in it for the money. He didn't seem to be making loads of money out of the thing.
No, if anything, it ruined his career.
Yeah. So I try to steer a middle course. Okay. And if I don't have proof that what he's saying is true, but I'm keeping an open mind.
Yeah.
I found it odd that when Lazar came out, that was when the UFO field was awash with rumors about Area 51 and underground bases and the government having saucers and making deals with aliens and all of this. And then Bob Lazar comes out at the same time. I find that suspicious.
Mm-hmm. Okay. Well, timing questionable, but I don't know. I don't know if we'll ever know the truth. But William says, because it was erased, I'm assuming are you talking, William, about maybe his diplomas and such? Because it was erased along with his social security number. Talk with Jim Goodall. He can confirm that for you.
Yeah, I mean, Lazar claims that his background documentation was erased.
Mm-hmm.
And we know, I mean, the government does, they sheep dip people. They, if you're going into the CIA, in fact, just a couple of days ago, I was listening to an audio book about some of the CIA's activities, and they were talking about Philip Agee. And Philip Agee was a CIA operative, and he went into the Air Force, and that's how, he went into the Air Force too, and then disappears into the CIA. But the interesting thing was, this book was talking about how the Air Force had a specific unit of people going into the CIA. In other words, the Air Force unit itself was basically phony. It was just for the purpose of running people into the CIA.
Yeah.
So they do things like that, and they do, they do they sheep dip people. They, arrange so that, you can't be traced, or hopefully traced. And they don't want to, expose their operatives, that are at risk, in foreign countries and things. So they go to some lengths to keep that person's identity secret, or the fact that they're working in the CIA secret.
Yeah. So Eden says, that dude with the crazy story, I'm assuming he's talking about Bob Lazar, as far-fetched as it sounds, it's so detailed, and he seems so adamant about his experience and so wild. Why would anyone make such an insane story up is beyond me. I agree, because like I said, his career was ruined. His life was basically, I mean, he lives a very sheltered life at this point in time. I don't know why he would make that up either. And when he went to court, he still claimed the same things, and he knew that he was at risk for going to jail, and that would have been the time to say, okay, this isn't true, this is what I was doing. And yet he still stuck to his story. So that doesn't, that doesn't jive with me. If this guy is making it up, why would he still stick to his story even in court?
Right. And he really has stuck to his story.
Yeah.
So, why would he make it up? Well, I mean, if he did make it up, I would almost think that there is some kind of involvement with the government with that to try to, influence people's perceptions about this. And, who knows what they're testing at Area 51, really. We know that they test, quote unquote, conventional advanced technology, SR-71 type stuff. So who knows that maybe they go to some length, to cover it up by creating wild stories, and you get people to think that they're, instead of whatever jet they're developing, that it's a UFO, that there are aliens, who knows, but it's a possibility.
Yes. Which to me makes no sense, because we make some very badass airplanes. I don't think we need to make up something even more. We make some awesome stuff. I love it. I mean, the SR-71, the perfect example. Coolest plane ever made. Let's see.
Yeah,
somebody has... Oh, go ahead. Sorry.
They've replaced it with something even more interesting.
Which one?
I don't know. Maybe. Well, I know they were testing something like the Aurora. I mean, I've seen designs of planes that are, they're basically space planes. They either take off on their own, or they take off from a mother ship, get out over the Pacific, and then they go into what's essentially almost low Earth orbit.
Yes.
And it's just a way to get somewhere really fast to take photographs or whatever. Yeah.
So I believe that, especially with the type of engine that the SR-71 has, it is still the fastest plane we've ever made. It's awesome.
Yeah, it is. And when you think that it was developed in the late 50s and early 60s. Okay.
It's amazing, right?
But when you think they got that far along with aerodynamic technology back then where are they now? That's been an element of speculation, I know, with the UFO community.
Yes, I agree. I absolutely agree. So I'm excited at some point, 30 years from now, to find out what they're working on now. But yeah, they have some amazing new planes. Even the ones that we know about, they have some amazing new planes right now. Just super cool. Ross says, FYI, Bob Lazar was listed in the base phone book.
I haven't heard that he was listed in the Area 51 phone book, and I don't know if there is one or was one,
right.
But he was. It's pretty well accepted now that he is listed in the Los Alamos phone book, or the Los Alamos Scientific Laboratory phone book. So he apparently did work at Los Alamos for a while.
Yes. Hold on a second.
I don't think there's an Area 51 base phone book that we have access to.
Yeah. Okay. All right. Somebody corrected me. Excalibur says the X-15 was faster than the SR-71. Yes, the SR-71 has a speed record of 3.2. The X-15 rocket plane, so it's a different type of engine, set a record for winged vehicles with a speed of Mach 6.7. Different engines. I still hold the SR-71 is king.
They had two completely different purposes. SR-71 was for, reconnaissance work, almost routine, but the X-15 was designed to get into the edge of space. It was an experimental craft, and actually, I don't know how many people know this, but Neil Armstrong was an X-15 pilot.
Oh, was he?
Man to go on the moon, yeah.
That's awesome.
Yeah, he was a research test pilot. Yeah, they're completely different. And the Bell X-1, first plane they got to go to break the speed of sound, was a rocket plane. They just didn't. I guess they just didn't have the jet engine technology at the time to get them there. Yeah.
Well, they're all very cool. All of them. Okay, so the MJ-12, with all of the questions that we have around it, with all of the kind of intrigue that we have around it, at this point in time, what is it, 40, 50 years later, what have we learned from it, if anything?
Well, it depends on who you talk to. If there's a school of thought that they're hoaxes and they should be ignored, then there's this theory I've been exploring that they're somehow related to counterintelligence work, one way or another. There's a theory that it's some effort to get information out into the public in a way that allows for plausible deniability. And those are the three things that, and I guess the other possibility is that some of them are legit and that MJ-12 actually existed, and now there's a possibility, like I said before, Lynn, there may have been an MJ-12 committee, but it didn't have anything to do with UFOs. It, could have had some other purpose. And maybe if there was a real UFO committee like that, maybe it had a different name, and they give us MJ-12 to throw us off the track. But, somebody asked me if I've ever talked with Richard Doty, but Doty has stated to me, through communication, that he had heard about MJ-12 for years. People have heard about MJ-12 for years. And there's a person, the tester model expert, I can't remember his name at the moment, but he had a contact that told him that he was on an Air Force base in Turkey, and when they had UFO sightings there, they reported them to MJ-12. and I can provide supporting documentation for that. The person, I think he told this person over the phone, and he wrote it down as NJ12, but he actually meant MJ12. And you get tiny little snippets that maybe there's some support to it.
Right. Well, maybe it's a combination of all of them. Maybe there's I always find like we want Occam's razor, we want the most simple explanation is usually the truth. But when it comes to government, I find that's not necessarily always the case. It tends to be quite convoluted and never exactly what we think it might be. So I don't know.
Yeah, I mean, one analyst has claimed that MJ12 might have been for the purpose of continuity of government. And there was a lot of concern, during the 50s that there might be a nuclear war, and, how do you keep the government going? How do you protect the president and all that? And Eisenhower had a super secret policy in a safe of what they would do if there was a nuclear war, and they'd declare martial law and all this kind of stuff. And that MJ12 might have had something to do with that. But that's John Alexander's book. He says that in his book. But you look at the list of people on the MJ12 document, and that's not who I would come up with for continuity of government. Okay. It doesn't make sense to me in that respect. I mean, if you're going to build underground facilities and all of this kind of thing, I mean, the first person you go to is General Groves, and he's not on the list. General Groves built the Pentagon, and he was over the Manhattan Project to build the atomic bomb. So, he's not on the list. Other people that you would think if it was continuity of government, but maybe it was continuity of government, and the MJ12 document's phony, and there was an MJ12 with continuity of government, and it was a completely different list of people. That's possible too.
Yeah. Okay, so with all of this research you've done, Tom, what are you leaning towards? What do you think?
It all depends on whether they've recovered UFOs or not.
Okay.
If they've recovered UFOs, then it would have to, by nature, be done under extreme secrecy. Okay. And it would be logical if, for example, if there was a Roswell saucer, that, the recovery people, they go up the chain of command, and then you'd have the chief of staff or whomever calling President Truman and saying, we've got this thing going on, and what do we do?
Yeah.
And I can see President Truman saying, well, get a committee of, top people together that we can trust, and get this stuff, secured, and say whatever you need to say to get, the public, off the track about it. And then let's get these top people in here and get them, to look at this. I could see that happening,
Yeah.
Now, if they've never recovered any saucers, then we've just got the UFO phenomenon as we understand it, of all these sightings and all this kind of thing. And there's this phenomenon in the government. Like I said, they have all these other priorities. They have all these other things they need to be doing besides worrying about UFOs. And I think there's one indication I keep hearing when I hear people talk about what's going on in the government, is that they just ignore it. Yeah, the data's on the tapes, or the data's on this or that, and they store it, but nobody does anything about it. Nobody follows up on it. Okay. So maybe if there haven't been saucer recoveries and aliens and all of this, then maybe, that may be one of the things that's going on. But I find it hard to believe that if there's any serious UFO activity, like a landing, or UFOs maybe, getting close into military facilities and things like that, that they would just ignore it and not investigate it. Now, in investigating it, that's all probably classified, and we don't get to see that.
Yeah.
Okay. So we're just little old civilians, and we don't get to see what's really going on. And there's been an assertion made that in this UAP task force, that the guy at Bowling Air Force Base that has all the hot documentation in the safes said they never came to me and asked for it. So
interesting.
all the proof may be in a safe somewhere. Bowling Air Force Base, Area 51, or are we going to get to see it?
No.
Nope.
Absolutely not.
So we're left with speculate, and you can't. I wrote another paper about psychological warfare and strategic deception, but the military, well, over the years, they refer to it as psychological warfare, and then they refer to it as strategic influence. And now they call it information operations. And if you read the government directive about that, it's, at least what I've seen, it's very opaque.
Yeah.
But when you look at the state of the UFO field today, when we consider the really material issues regarding UFOs, we just don't know what to believe. A lot of us just don't know what to believe, and I can't help but wonder sometimes if that isn't by design. That it's intended to be that way, that we as the public simply don't know what to believe.
Right. You know why? Because we don't have a need to know.
Right.
I mean, it's the answer nobody's going to want to hear and nobody's going to like, but it is true. We don't have a need to know. We have curiosity, but we don't have a need to know.
Well, there's a well-known UFO researcher, very related to this whole subject, that I tried to communicate with, and his answer was, you may want to know, but you don't have a need to know. And this is just a civilian UFO researcher, and I'm thinking, you sound like...
Okay, well then. Right. First of all, become a member of the government, then you can tell me that.
So,
just give me his number. I'll call him for you.
Yeah. We can talk about that offline.
Yeah. That's crazy.
Yeah. That's
what somebody's a little too big for their britches.
But there are a lot of things that we don't need to know. I mean, there was a point made. There's a book called Blank Spots on the Map, and it's about these secret bases, not necessarily UFOs, but like secret bases on Afghanistan and Iraq and places like that. But the author referred to a Harvard scholar who made the point that a very large fraction of our modern history is classified.
Yeah.
Okay. And so much of our documented history is classified that we as American citizens don't even know what our own history is. Okay. And I think that I don't know how you can get over that. I think that's a reality that we need to understand, that as citizens, we just don't have access to the full information of what our government has been up to.
Right.
And most of it is conventional stuff, like political stuff, But who knows what else is in there that we don't know about.
Yes, true. Okay, Sasquatch, I do want to get to your question, but I want to address this comment too. It says, wait a minute. What if your government is making deals with ET behind your backs for technology and you think you don't deserve to know what the government is giving up? No, I don't think we deserve to know anything unless it's directly affecting us in a harmful way. I don't think that they make deals with, in secret all of the time. So why is it just with the ET issue that all of a sudden we feel we have the right to know these things. Do I want to know? Absolutely. Do I want to know? Am I curious? Of course I am. Do we have the right to know? And do we have a need to know are also two very different things. Do we have a right to know as citizens? Maybe. Do we have a need to know? Probably not. Need to know means I would be directly involved with it. You would be directly involved with it, that we would have the security clearance. Most of us do not. So no, I personally don't think we have a need to know. I don't know if you feel the same, Tom, but I know it's probably going to be an unpopular opinion.
Mao Zedong said that power comes from the barrel of a gun. And don't get me wrong, I'm not advocating violence, but right. I think the amount of information that we as the American people can obtain is directly proportional to the amount to which we insist that we receive it. Okay.
Mm-hmm. Now, truth.
We, in theory, the government is of the people. The people elect representatives that are supposed to represent us. The government taxes us, whatever it is that they do, they take out of our paychecks to do. And it's a matter of priorities, with the population. How important is it to the American people in terms of putting pressure on the government to insist that the government provide certain information? That's a long step from, the man on the street, so to speak, or the person on the street, caring enough and organizing enough and putting enough pressure on the government to actually make a difference. And whether we have a need to know, that's a matter of opinion.
Yeah.
Okay. People that run the military and that run the intelligence agencies, they make decisions about what should be classified and which people have a need to know what. But this is not just some trivial little thing like, a CIA agent's identity in a foreign country. This is, the possibility that we're dealing with non-human intelligence.
Mm-hmm.
And that's an important issue, whether, that's a matter of opinion, whether we need to know that or not.
Yeah.
I am, being a UFO person, I'm of the opinion that we do need to know that. Now, is it cut and dried? Are there not issues that are involved in, the big D disclosure? Yes, there are. There's no simple answer to that.
Yeah. Yeah. And let's see. Angels. Okay. Before I do this, because I do want to get to this question, and I've been keeping him kind of on hold here for a while. What's your theory / thoughts on the huge black triangle-shaped aircraft?
Well, there were reports of those in the 90s and early 2000s, and then there have been, continuing reports, and there have been rumors that some of them are ours and some of them are alien. When you look at the SR-71 and you look at some of these aircraft designs, it's certainly possible that they could have aircraft that are triangular shape. Now, are they anti-gravity? I don't know. You're definitely getting up to a higher level. But somebody made this point, and I think it's a safe assumption that they would not be testing experimental technology over populated areas. They just wouldn't do it. That's what Area 51 is for.
Yeah, I was just going to say that.
So if there are big triangular craft running around, they're probably, and if it's true, then they probably are, alien.
Mm-hmm. True. Yeah, I know. It's so funny to me that the triangular craft gets everyone's attention so much. I mean, because there are a lot of different unidentified crafts. Obviously, we've seen some videos of some. We've heard people talk about, the tic tac shape, the traditional flying saucer shape, the spheres, but something about the triangles gets everybody's attention, and I'm always curious as to what the psychology is behind that. Why the triangle? I don't know.
It's interesting that we've gone from saucers to, triangles and balls of light, and we've heard of a cube with a sphere inside it, or vice versa.
Yeah.
But one thing that's true about in UFO history and UFO sightings reports is there just about every shape you can think of has been reported.
Yeah. Mm-hmm. I agree. Okay, so I want to address this. Angels, I, as an ET abductee, respectfully, completely disagree with you, Lynn. We are being abducted, and that's kidnapping, and we are being tested and experimented on. That is inexcusable. I agree, Angels, that you have a right to know about that, but that does not necessarily mean that our government is involved. And again, I know this may be an unpopular opinion, but it's also, if we're going to be open-minded about many things, that is something we also need to be open-minded about. Maybe they know, maybe they don't. We don't know for sure right now. If they do know, yes, you're absolutely right. You're entitled to know that. If they don't know, it's not really for them to tell you because they don't have anything to do with it. I don't know if you have any thoughts, Tom.
Well, I was just listening to right before the show, I was listening to an interview with Lou Elizondo, and one of the reasons he gives that they don't provide more information about these incidents, with the Navy out in the sea, is they don't want to give away sources and methods. Yeah. How they collected information, how they got it. But if you get into the scenario of, say, a Roswell recovery, I don't really see how that argument holds up. What sources and methods are there, to keep secret? They recovered a saucer, in New Mexico. So it's not like they got it from a Soviet spy or something. So I'm finding, and I'm not criticizing Lou Elizondo. I mean, I think he's a terrific guy. I love what he's doing. On the one hand, he's giving the reason of sources and methods there, but then when they try to pin him down about back engineering this technology, he's very cagey and evasive. Mm-hmm. I don't think you have a sources and methods argument for not making that public.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Okay, I'm going to be full of unpopular opinions tonight. I know everybody loves Lou Elizondo, and I've said it before. This isn't news for those that have seen me on Dave's show and on my show. There's something about Lou Elizondo that I don't trust, and it is, I think, because of what you were just saying, is he can be very cagey, and it's like, how much information has he really given us? If he would give us some information, great. I would be like, yay, Lou Elizondo on Lou's side. But and it's not that I'm against him. I just don't think he's really given us a whole lot. He talks around the subject quite a bit, but I haven't noticed him actually telling us anything. And then he claims, well, I have the NDA. Well, a lot of people have NDAs that they go against. They take that risk. So if you really want to come out and give us the information, come out and give us the information. Don't sit there and say, I know it, but I'm not telling you. I don't know. There's just something.
Well, here's a discrepancy as I'm seeing it, Lynn. On the one hand, he's all but, he hasn't come out and admitted it. But if you read between the lines, like I said before, he's basically saying that somebody has this technology and they're working on back engineering it. Okay. Mm-hmm. And then on the other hand, we have this UAP task force collecting information on UFOs, like as if this is just something new that they've decided to do. So if the government has technology that they're trying to back engineer here, and then over here, they're acting like, oh, we need to start looking at UFO incidents. That's a huge disconnect. Okay, but it's the same person talking about the two things. Lou Elizondo is talking about both of them.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, am I making any sense? I mean, there's a disconnect.
Yeah. Yeah. I don't know. I don't have the answer for like why. I don't know. Sometimes you listen to some people and they just don't vibe. You're like, there's something I can't quite put my finger on. That's Lou for me. Hopefully I'm wrong. Hopefully he'll be the guy that everybody thinks he is, and he'll, bring out wonderful information and help, further along disclosure. I just don't know. And you know what it is? Because he's been cagey, because he hasn't given us a ton of information, because there are question marks around him, and because he's also said that he would run for Congress, I feel like he's using the UFO community, and that makes me angry because I don't want to see anybody take advantage of our community. And I'm not sure that he may or may not be doing that. So I'll wait and see. And reserve judgment.
Well, I work out of the assumption that he's working in good faith, that what he's doing is in good faith, and I don't really have any reason to believe that he's not.
Yeah. Jeremy, I do not want to murder Lou. I have nothing against the guy personally. That's funny. I know everybody thinks I don't like him as a person. I don't know him. I have no issue with him as a person, but it's just some of the things. See, yeah, Excalibur says the same thing. Yeah, the Congress stuff. It seems like a political campaign. Like, I don't know.
Well, and I can't help but get the impression that this is all orchestrated.
Yes, I agree. I don't think he's telling us anything that he hasn't been approved to tell us.
But, he may have undergone, consequences for what he's doing too. And he's had people in the Pentagon, what he claims are telling lies about him and saying that he didn't work on ATIP or he wasn't running it or wasn't assigned to that. And, he's pretty upset about that.
Right. So I would ask the question then. So Lou hasn't been able to give us any proof that any documentation that he did work on this program, and yet everybody believes it. Bob Lazar also hasn't had a lot of proof, and many people doubt him. What's the difference? Like, why do they believe Lou over Bob Lazar?
Well, to be on solid ground investigatively,
Mm-hmm.
need to get documentation to prove that Lou Elizondo has been employed in the Pentagon, at least, in the military or doing, something there. Okay.
Right.
Now he's kind of let some people see little things, and he showed me. Now I'm with MUFON. He gave a briefing to the MUFON board early in the game, and it's the same thing he's been saying publicly. He hasn't been telling us anything, but he did show me, this memo, and this memo has come out publicly. I think that George Knapp released it from Harry Reid, from the Congress. But the version I saw had his name on it. Okay. So it's kind of like, see it. Okay. It's, just very briefly flashed it. So, that kind of thing. He's been really kind of nervous about, talking about this stuff. And he's been very concerned about, he's still loyal apparently to, keeping with the government rules and not disclosing classified information and respecting the classification system and the confidentiality and the secrecy. And he's probably also concerned that he might slip up and say something, that could get him in trouble. He says that. So I think that he's acting in good faith. And until I see really clear evidence otherwise, that's the assumption I'm going to work out of.
No, and I respect that, and a lot of people have that opinion. I just think, okay, let me address Jeremy too. Harry Reid literally wrote a letter saying this. Yes, I'm aware of that, but Harry Reid also has a vested interest. So I would like to see documentation that Lou worked for ATIP, something. Do I believe he was in the military? Yes, I absolutely do. I'm not questioning his military career. Do I know for certain that he did run ATIP? No, I don't. I haven't seen anything to prove that. So until we do, I guess I'm kind of in the I don't know category, because I'm not going to just take his word for it. And along with Harry Reid, again, nothing against these people, but Harry Reid has a vested interest in this as well. So Harry, you know, a lot of these guys are politicians. So they aren't going into this without a reason. What that reason is, I don't know. But
well, when you say Harry Reid has a vested interest, what do you mean by that?
Well, Harry Reid is very much involved with wanting to get UFO disclosure out there as well. And he has been interested in that and trying to push for that politically. And if you have someone who can come out and say, oh, I'm in charge of this program that Harry Reid helped to create, and Harry Reid is going to say, yes, of course he was. So I think it furthers the story that we still have yet to have documentation of. Does that make sense?
Yeah. There seems to be a connection there for sure.
Hmm.
I mean, there's Harry Reid and there's Robert Bigelow and, you know, and Lou Elizondo and all that. And there's definitely a connection between OSAP and Bigelow, you know, and there's supposedly a 400-page report coming from that I think Tim McMillan got to see part of it. But it hasn't been made public. But then Elizondo said that he didn't work on OSAP. But we've been getting some conflicting information.
Yeah.
Would it be possible to take a 5-minute break? We've been talking.
Yes, no, actually, absolutely. We can actually, I usually end it right about now anyway, so I don't tend to go the 3 hours that
well, I'll be glad to go, but
yeah, if you want to take a break, if everybody still wants to keep talking, go for it. You can take a 5-minute break. Absolutely. That is no problem.
Okay, I'll be back in a minute.
All right. Thanks. Jeremy, I have nothing against Lou personally. I don't know Lou. So it's not that I don't like him. I just doubt his authenticity simply because I haven't seen anything to show that it is true. Thanks. I know there are some people who, why do you need a letter from, no, who do you need a letter from to believe him? Oh, who's my guest tomorrow night? Tom Seward. I've never talked with him before, so I'm excited. Who do I need a letter from? I don't need a letter from anyone. I need documentation to show that he was in these programs. Hey, look, I know so many of you love Lou. I get that. But I'm entitled to my opinion too. And I doubt what he's saying. And I'm sorry. Tomorrow night, I'm covering for Michael again tomorrow night. He took the night off, so I'll be on tomorrow night. Thanks, Steve. Oh, well, that's what we're going to be talking about tomorrow night. And I don't know a whole heck of a lot about Bigfoot, so we shall see how I do. Jenny, I'm not sure. I didn't see what you did to step in, but no worries.
Okay.
Okay. Tomorrow's show is about Sasquatch Island, which I know nothing about, so I'm very excited to hear about that. All right. On a question of 11, yeah, you have the right to your own opinion as well. Thank you. There you go. Lou believes what he's saying, but that doesn't prove if it's true or not. All right. Everybody has a lot of feelings about Lou.
Well, he's been out there.
There
was a time when people were complaining he was only talking to a couple of media outlets, and he left to the stars. And then now he's going out and he's talking to everybody. He's been all over the place. That's good.
Yeah. Yeah, it would be great if you told us more. But yes, it is good. So I'm curious about this. I can tell that Lynn is a former dependent of a high-ranking military member. How so? So I want proof. Maybe. Okay, we got a question for you. What is your take on JFK Jr. being Q?
That's anybody's guess. I'll admit, when I was listening to one podcast and they mentioned Q, and I'd never heard of it, and this is going back like 3 years, or 2017. So I started checking into it, and I wasn't reading Q directly, but I was like going on YouTube, and you'd have this commentator talking about what was on Q that day. And I listened to it for a while, and the original information that came out on Q was, they're going to arrest Hillary Clinton, and they've got like 10,000 sealed indictments, and all these people are going to be rounded up, and these kind of claims were being made. And I kind of followed along for several months, and none of these things panned out. And the language in Q was so cryptic that you had to really these people are sitting down just trying to analyze it, figure out what this person was saying. So I just dropped it. And as far as I'm concerned, Q could be anybody or it could be nobody.
All right.
I mean, we have enough trouble trying to understand the MJ-12 documents, without trying to understand Q.
Truth. Oh my goodness. I'm looking to see if anybody else has any questions that I missed while we were talking. Yeah. Oh, see, I got them all fired up about Lou. In the minds of many, Lou's credentials in the Army give him credence about the UFO subject, whether it is deserved or not. Very possibly. Very possibly.
Well, and you can't, I don't know how things work over there, but how did he end up doing that?
Right?
Like I kind of get the feeling that he had a background in Army counterintelligence and things, and maybe he interrogated, people of interest, from the Middle East, that kind of thing. And then how did he end up investigating UFOs? I think that's a question that a lot of people would like to have answered.
Yeah, I think he did say he was in counterintelligence. Now that I hear you saying that, I think I do remember him saying something to that effect. But again, like he gives a lot of kind of half answers to things, and that always bugs me. Like if he's talking in circles, that's what bothers me, because it's just kind of like, well, we're not really getting a whole heck of a lot of information, even though he makes it seem like we are. But again, I have nothing against the guy personally, guys.
Well, that is frustrating some people, that we don't seem to be getting a lot of information.
Yeah. Right.
But at the same time, when you look at what's happened since 2017, there has been really an important change in the way the government, at least nominally, the way the government is addressing this. Now whether it pans out to be anything significant in the long run remains to be seen.
I agree, but is that due to Lou? That I don't know. There were a lot of players in the game, so can I specifically say that Lou made that change? No. There are a lot of people. What about Chris Mellon? Why isn't he getting the attention?
He's gotten some, and I mean, if I was going to name, the culprits in this, it would be Elizondo and Mellon. It seems that those two have done, what's been done, and maybe Jim Semivan has something to do with it, or maybe people that we don't know about. I mean, there was, before this TTSA thing came up, there was you had Tom DeLonge communicating with God, I'm having trouble with names tonight, but Hillary Clinton's campaign manager.
Yeah, I know who you're talking about, but I can't think of him either.
Yeah, you had that going on, and he's a big enthusiast, and said that he was sorry he couldn't find out more about UFOs when he was in the Obama administration. That was going on, and I think there are other people that have been involved in this, maybe that we don't know about. Yeah,
right.
John Podesta.
John Podesta, yes. Thank you, guys.
Thank you.
Okay, I will check. I haven't seen it. I have looked, but I will look and see if there is the proof that I'm looking for. And then if there is, I will come out and say, hail to Lou Elizondo. But until then.
Greenwald has proofs that Elizondo was running ATIP. Is that what they're saying?
I'm assuming. Maybe they can clarify, but I haven't seen anything. Not that, and I haven't heard that there's anything out. But
I mean, for months, Greenwald was, acting very skeptical of Elizondo because the Pentagon wouldn't confirm anything, or they were putting out contradictory information, or they were saying that he wasn't running ATIP, and all this.
Yeah. Okay, you're saying I'm just sharing what I know. I'm not trying to prove a point, which I appreciate, but I just wasn't sure which proof you're referring to. So, well, we'll see. Go. Jeremy, you're on fire tonight. Go look, Nancy Drew. Awesome. Okay. So we have MJ12. We have the UAP assessment. We don't have the full report. Is there a connection? What have we learned from MJ12 that maybe we need to keep in mind as far as the UAP assessment? Anything? Nothing? What are your thoughts?
Here's one parallel with MJ12. That is MJ12 being coming into the public domain under questionable circumstances and being somewhat suspicious. And then as soon as this report comes out, we know that the Congress got the classified report, and a couple of things started turning up almost immediately. There's a list of topics, I think, that were passed on to one or more UFO researchers. And, there's a question, is that genuine? Is it authentic information? Is it fake information? So there's the parallel that I can tell you immediately with MJ12 is that stuff starts floating into the public domain, and it comes about anonymously. Okay.
Yeah.
You don't have, but that is one thing that's good on our side, is that maybe the Congress will leak some of it. If they leak it, then hey, that's in our favor.
Yeah, that's great. I mean, Stephen Bassett I think he was the one saying when we were all on that panel talking about it on Dave Scott's show, that he felt that, I think it was him, wasn't it, who was saying he thought that somebody in Congress was hopefully going to leak a little bit of the info, which would be great. I would love to see what they got to see. But
they could also declassify it. Okay, they
hopefully
could do that. They probably won't, but But I mean, I'm trying to be realistic because, like, look at the JFK assassination.
Mm-hmm.
For years and years, you've had all kinds of really competent investigators digging into that, and
Yeah.
they built quite a large quantity of documentation on it. It was a real event that everybody knows happened. And now, what has it been? How many years has it been? 63. So that's what 40 plus 20, 60 years.
Yeah.
They still haven't released all the information.
Yeah.
In fact, I think the Congress passed a law that it was supposed to be released in 2018 or sometime, and then it came down to Trump, and Trump agreed not to let some of it remain classified.
Hmm.
So here it is. You have the Kennedy assassination, something as important as that, something that's obviously happened. There's no question about that. And you talk about a right to know and need to know. There's actually been legislation to release the information, and they're still holding on to it.
Yeah.
So how realistic is it that we're going to get some big disclosure, that really spills the beans? This is why I'm careful about these things.
Mm-hmm. I agree. Like, I would love to get some information, as we all would, but I'm always very doubtful that we will. And I don't know how much we will get even in our lifetimes. I don't know. Maybe I've just been in this field for too long too. I'm jaded. I just don't see it happening. At least not a lot. We've gotten some. We've gotten a little bit.
Yeah, we should be thankful for that, I guess.
I guess.
No, it's a situation where we're not in control at all. We're reduced to having to extract information from the government through the Freedom of Information Act, which is like teeth.
Mm-hmm.
It can even take years. There are instances that I know John Greenwald has mentioned that have been pending for 6 years, things like that. So
yeah,
there's just I don't, some people are coming out and say, "Oh, disclosure is right around the corner." Mm-hmm. Look, there are some things that would have to happen if there was really big, huge news, recovered saucers, bodies, maybe even relationships with one or more alien groups. Society would have to be prepared. Okay. Mm-hmm. I'm talking about way more than just the MJ-12 documents. The academic community would have to be prepared. The scientific community would have to be prepared. The religious segment would have to be prepared. The big corporations would have to be prepared. All of these different, all of the press, the media would have to be prepared, and they would have to go out and somehow start preparing these elements of authority in society. Okay, mm-hmm. So if they did that, then at some point it would become an open secret, because you couldn't keep that secret. Okay, informing all these groups and getting everybody ready for this big change, and then it would eventually become common knowledge. Okay.
Yeah.
And by the time they actually came out with a disclosure, practically everybody would know that it was on the way. Okay. And that's not happening.
Yeah.
Okay. That's not happening.
I agree. Gnome Squatch says, supposedly MJ-12 consulted Einstein on the alien subject. I haven't heard that. Have you?
That's an MJ-12 related document that's on the MJ-12 website, or the Majestic documents.com website that the Woods have put up. It's been up for years. There's an opinion, I guess you could say, discussion of extraterrestrial life and what it might mean, that supposedly is written by Einstein and Robert Oppenheimer. So, and you can go onto the majesticdocuments.com website and read that. But it's another question document. I mean, there's no real provenance. There's no chain of custody. It's just a document that's there. It's interesting.
Yeah.
I mean, this stuff fascinates me. I built my life around it.
Yeah.
But I can't tell you definitely, they consulted with Einstein. Now, if they recovered a UFO, would it make sense for them to go to Einstein and, ask his opinion? Yeah.
Absolutely. Yeah. Absolutely. Didn't Einstein also say that he got some of his information? He believed he got some of his information from like extraterrestrial downloads, basically.
I think that was the folklore. That's folklore about Tesla.
Tesla. Yeah, I remember Tesla saying that too, but I thought Einstein did too, but maybe I'm right or wrong. I mean, but it's interesting either way. Either one of them is fascinating. So
I have some copies of my documents in my file that I received from Robert Wood about Albert Einstein, and there was some concern. Albert Einstein had a secretary when he was still in Germany in Berlin. Mm-hmm. And there was suspicion that she was a courier for Soviet intelligence. That she was a commie sympathizer, and she was passing information on to them. And I think the FBI was looking at that, trying to figure out if Einstein was some kind of a security threat. And I think there was suspicion that she was cooperating with them, but I don't think they had really, complete solid proof.
Yeah.
And they never charged Einstein with anything.
Well, that's good. Good. All right. Well, unless anybody has any last questions, so if you guys do, ask them now. Somebody, while I'm waiting, I thought there was one. Hold on 2 seconds. Let me just see. And it was before we were talking about Einstein. There was something we were talking about. And now I can't for the life of me remember what it was. But okay. Well, it doesn't look like we have any so far. So I'm going to say, Tom, thank you so much. It has been an absolute pleasure having you on here. It was wonderful.
I've enjoyed it. It's fun talking with you, Lynn.
Oh, good. It was fun talking with you too.
I hope you're a good witch, because I don't want to get
am. Most of the time. Like the classifications you had, white, gray, and black, and one of your reports, maybe gray.
Oh, okay.
It's questionable.
Gray witch propaganda, huh?
Great witch propaganda, absolutely. Oh, wait, hold on a second. We got a couple questions that they just threw in here. Is Wright-Patterson UFO central?
It seemed like, it actually, crashed UFOs notwithstanding, Wright-Patterson was UFO central during the 50s and 60s. Okay, that's where Project Blue Book was out of, and that's Air Technical Intelligence Center. That's where it was happening. So it was UFO central. Whether it is today or not, I doubt it.
And Aussie Steve says, Tom, what is really exciting you about the resurgence in UFO? A good question.
Well, I mean, if you're referring to like the Navy revelations and all that, I'm kind of like you, Lynn. I'm so jaded at this point that unless it's something really substantive or extremely interesting, like something that really interests me is like the Admiral Wilson document. We didn't really talk about that, but that was a development that that's been exciting for me. If they're seeing Tic Tacs out there, then that's certainly interesting, and might be a good idea if they can figure out what's going on.
Mm-hmm. I would agree. Definitely, especially if it's over military airspace. Probably something we should look into.
Well, they talk about safety, air safety, all this, but nobody can come up with a single instance where a UFO has crashed into an airplane and caused an airplane crash.
True.
And
they have buzzed them, but they haven't crashed.
Yeah, and I'm not talking about the Mantell incident. That's way back in the 50s, and I think the plausible explanation to me was he saw a balloon and he went too high without oxygen and he passed out. Okay. Gotcha. So other than that, I don't think there's a single instance that anybody has come up with a saucer causing an airplane crash.
Yeah, no, I don't think so either. But I think it's just the fact that they're in our military airspace. Though I have to say, when they have been told not to fire on them, and that to me is suspicious. That tells me that they know more than they're saying that they know.
Maybe so, and maybe some of the brass see it as, it's not a threat. I mean, if deer run across an Air Force base, is that a threat to national security? Right. I mean, and UFOs fly through. I mean, just because we're running flight operations in some part of the Pacific doesn't mean that the UFOs have to abide by our rules.
Right. But if they know they're not a threat, then obviously they know something. But it's interesting. Let's see. Maybe something will come out. I mean, you and I can throw a party if they do, Tom. It'll be interesting.
We'll have a toast.
Yes, absolutely.
I'll get out my Chico bottle.
Yes. Sasquatch says, thanks for taking the questions tonight, Lynn. Thanks for answering them, Tom. You guys had great questions as always.
Yes, and many thanks to the audience. I love your questions.
Yes, they always have really good ones. Awesome. All right. Well, thank you so much, Tom. Again, it has just been lovely. We will definitely have to have you on again to chat with us.
It's great meeting with you and great talking with you.
You as well. Good night. All right, guys, let me take us out of here. We've got Mr. Ron Bumblefoot Thaw rocking in the background with Women Rule the World. Bumblefoot is the official music of Spaced Out Radio, rocking us in and out of every single show. So come on, my little demons, and dance it up to the guitar god himself. A special thanks to everyone listening in at home, in your cars, with your coven, or wherever you may be. Thanks to everyone participating in our chat rooms on YouTube, Twitch, and on Twitter at #SpacedOutRadio. Remember, this show is copyright by Spaced Out Radio and SOR Media Ventures Limited. Thanks for sharing your evening with us. Mr. Bumblefoot, we need you to send us off into the night. And even though the broomstick may have landed for the night, remember, there's always a seat for you on the next flight. Good night, and go make some mischief.
We launch 1,000 ships into the rocks, and from the cliffs they watch us sink down in our thorny crowns. Beggars dressed as emperors, offering you 7 wonders, promising the deepest thunder. We'll tell you you're the perfect girl. We'll crawl for miles through the sand to win your hand and be your man. I try to rise so cool, but you know I'm just a fool for you.